New to Sacramento, but not to sports talk. It's the Nick Cattle Show on Sports 1140 KHTK.
Joining me right now on the Nick Cattle Show, Sports 1140 KHTK, is Mike Lombardi, former NFL executive. Of course, he is part of the Lombardi line on VSiN, and also don't forget about his podcast, the GM Shuffle. Mike, thanks for the time. I want to jump right in with Deshaun Watson. If you were a front office executive of a team currently, would you have dealt for Watson?
I think it's a hard question to answer because I'm not privy to all the information, and not having a face-to-face meeting with him, I think that becomes a real problem. So, what I know about Deshaun before all this happened, I would have said yes. I thought he was truly a guy that could change a culture in a building. What I've learned since then, I may be wrong. I wrote about this for on vsin.com, and I certainly, can think of myself as being wrong. As you often know, wisdom comes later. So I would be in a holding pattern, if anything, because I need more information.
Gotcha. Your thoughts on what the Browns gave up in that deal?
Well, I mean, look, it's a funny trade for the Browns because do you remember they traded the 12th pick to Houston so Houston could pick Watson?
Yeah.
That was a time when the Browns didn't think Watson was worthy of the pick. That was when they were absolutely in love with their analytical department. So, I mean, look, the Browns have a good team. And I think that because they have a good team, they can offset losing 3 number 1 picks. And now that they got a legitimate quarterback, I think it's really good.
Mike Lombardi is with us. Mike, of course, the second part of that deal was the contract. And a lot of people had their thoughts on the contract. I had my thoughts on the contract. Your thoughts on the contract and the structure of that deal?
Well, I think it's a deal that's not going to be good for the other teams in the league because when you guarantee a guy who's involved in 22 civil suits and you guarantee completely button up his contract, to me, that makes it very challenging. And so I don't know how you do that, to me, but it was the way they had to get back in. It was the way they had to get back in, and I think that was the issue, and they did that.
What'd you make of the $1 million base salary for this coming year?
Well, they lowered his cap number. That's why they did that. They lowered his cap number. I mean, they're trying to balance 2 quarterbacks on a cap. And so the one guy's making $18 million. They'll remove him off the cap when they do something with him. And so they bought themselves to lower. Now, you could say, well, if he gets suspended, he doesn't lose money. That's also true. But I think they wanted to lower his cap number this year so that they could carry these 2 quarterbacks without a problem until they get into next year. And then what they'll do, if they have cap room, they'll book that cap room in the next year and keep going.
Mike Lombardi with us, former NFL executive with the VSiN Network, Lombardi line there, and also the GM Shuffle podcast. Mike, what happens with Baker Mayfield now?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for you on that one. I really don't because the market's done. The market is done. There's nothing available. Quarterbacks are really like musical chairs. There's 32 chairs. When all the chairs are taken, it's hard to get a gig. Where's Jimmy Garoppolo going to go? The Browns asked a team for a second-day pick, meaning a second or a third. They also asked another team for a first-round pick. They got laughed at. So I don't know where this all goes. I really don't. And I think that's the issue. Baker's going to have to probably get released and then get a new contract. Nobody wants to take on the contract.
Right.
That's the bigger issue. Nobody wants to take on the $18 million. Nobody wants to carry that on their cap. And because of that, he can't, because if you're carrying $18 million on your cap, you're saying he's the starter. I don't think anybody's willing to give him a starting job.
Mike, what happened with Baker? I mean, you go back a couple of years ago, some people felt good about him. He doesn't seem like he has an elite skill. I mean, he does not have, the greatest arm. He doesn't have the greatest accuracy, which was supposed to be his superpower coming out of college. What happened? I know people look at the coaching changes and all of that, but what happened with Baker Mayfield? Why, when you look around now, there's just really no teams interested in a guy who was the former number 1 pick just a few years ago?
I think he was overdrafted. Look, he was a small quarterback. He's under 6 feet. He's 6 feet tall. He has a really hard time seeing. I've often said this on my program on VSiN. I've said it on my podcast. When he comes back to the huddle in Oklahoma, oftentimes he would tell receivers, I didn't see you. He has a hard time seeing receivers down the field. It's one of the reasons why they changed and went more to a play-action pass scheme. because they wanted to separate the defense and give him some windows to see. When he's in shotgun all the time, he can't see. He has a hard time. And when people rush him inside and create a tight pocket in a tight area with hands up, he averaged over 6 passes being knocked down in most of his career. That's 6 times the defense got their hands on footballs. That's not good. I think clearly he was overdrafted. He was not the best quarterback in this draft. He was not better than Lamar Jackson. He was not better than Josh Allen. John Dorsey felt he was, and that was the mistake, and I think they're paying a price for it.
Mike Lombardi with us. Mike, you brought up a name just a few minutes ago, Jimmy Garoppolo, of course, around here in Sacramento, also the Bay Area. People trying to figure out what's going to happen with Jimmy. San Francisco, are they left now having to cut him?
Well, I think the bigger problem with Jimmy is the fact that nobody knows where that shoulder is.
Right.
What is the shoulder? How is the shoulder? It's hard. So until they get it, until someone can get a medical diagnosis on the shoulder, they say it's coming back in July. Look, and they said Andrew Luck was going to come back easy too, and he never did. I mean, it was hard for him. So shoulder injuries for quarterbacks are very difficult.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens and how that story ends. You know, everybody thought he'd be dealt, but they're in a tougher spot than ever. Let me ask you about the roll call of quarterbacks now in the AFC, Mike. When you look at the AFC depth at that position, I mean, it is just an absolute gauntlet. What do you make of the moves that have been made over the past couple of weeks, and where do you see kind of all of these pieces falling together? Do you still think Buffalo, as of right now, along with KC, is clearly above other teams, or do you think another team or two has kind of stepped up?
I think there's 8 teams that can compete for it. I think you got every team in the West can compete for a Super Bowl. I think you certainly have Cleveland, maybe even Baltimore, Cleveland and Cincinnati in the North. That's 6 teams, and then you got Buffalo. That's 7, and then you still have Tennessee in Tennessee and Indianapolis. So there's 9. I think it's anyone's guess. I think a lot of it's going to come down to health. I think a lot of it's going to come down to what team is healthy in November, December of next year that can lead them into the playoffs. Because I think ultimately it's too hard to judge. These teams are really good. Their quarterbacking play is what makes them different, especially in the West, especially in Cincinnati, especially now with Cleveland and in Buffalo. I mean, those 3 teams, along with the 4 in the West, have quarterbacks that can really play. And those 7, if they're hot and their team's healthy, can lead a team to the playoff.
Just 2 more for you, Mike. And again, thanks for the time. You spent some time with Bill Belichick. There's been a lot of criticism about the Patriots offseason, what they're doing with the coaching staff. What do you think what's happening in New England?
I mean, look, he's the greatest coach of all time. I think he has a pretty good understanding of what he needs, his team needs, and what he's going to do. Last year everybody was complaining he spent too much money. Now this year they're complaining he's not spending money. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, the man has won, is the winningest coach, active coach. He's got over, amazing amount of wins, 6 Super Bowls. I really wouldn't question him, especially if I was sitting there without half the knowledge.
Last one for you, Mike, and again, we appreciate your time. A lot of people not talking about the Baltimore Lamar Jackson situation. I feel like it's the most underplayed situation in the league. I mean, you've got a former MVP just a couple of years ago, no contract extension. How tough of a spot is Baltimore in right now with their franchise quarterback and these recent deals we've seen?
I think they're in a really tough spot. Look, I don't think they've done a good job of defining the offense around him. I think he should run what Cleveland's going to run with Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson will be sensational in that offense in Cleveland. I think Lamar needs to be under center. I think Lamar needs to be in a play-action pass scheme, not in an RPO scheme. I think they make a horrible mistake with him in that area. I think he's got to be in a play-action pass, separate the defense, throw the ball, get him out, utilize his skill set. Look, the only play in all of football that the quarterback blocks somebody is the bootleg. Because when the quarterback fakes to go out there to run a bootleg or a naked, someone's got to go with him. So that takes a defender away. And when you utilize Lamar like that, you help your running game, plus you allow him to get out on the perimeter and throw the ball down the field. I think they need to revamp their offense.
His name is Mike Lombardi, former NFL executive. You can check him out on the Visa Network here, Lombardi Line, also with his podcast, The GM Shuffle. Great stuff, Mike. It's always good to catch up with you. Let's do this again soon. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right, there goes Mike Lombardi, Sports 1140 KHTK. Now,